So, poor pitiful me. It's Christmas Eve and, I'm here, alone. No friends, no family. But don't feel bad for me because I'll just spend some time with you. Do you know one thing that I love about Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd Edition? Like being in that part of the hobby? It puts you into a very unique tribe. Given all the tribes in the hobby, it puts me in a unique tribe. Because in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, the old school is original D&D right up until AD&D 1st edition. The new school is 3rd edition straight up until 5th edition. And that means in the middle is 2nd edition, where neither tribe, the new school or the old school, accepts 2nd edition as a part of their part of the hobby. A lot of people claim that 2nd edition was leaning towards what we see in D&D when 3rd edition came out. Like, a lot of the ideas, supposedly, that WotC pushes with D&D was inspired by 2nd edition. Wrong. Some of the people that worked at TSR at the time had these extended ideas that they would take to WotC, and they put them in splat books in desperation to make money with 2nd edition. With anything they were putting out there, it was desperation. They put a bunch of splat books out for 2nd edition, which, you'd mind for ideas like items, shit like this. But the core rules, 99.9% of us ignored core rule changes from the splat books. Like, the effects the splat books had on 2nd edition DMs was nil. Like the game that you expect from the player's handbook is what you're getting from 99.9% of DMs. So if you criticize 2nd edition because of the splat books, well, then you really weren't there during the old school. Because, if you were there, you'd realize right away that 2nd edition DMs didn't count the splat books as being a part of, really the 2nd edition package. That is why we ignored core rule changes. Now, to say that us 2nd edition DMs at the time were pushing what you'd see in WotC later, well, that's a lie. The books can be out there, but if players are having no experience with these things, then you ask old 2nd edition players who have not kept up, right? Like, do you think 2nd edition was, helping D&D transition to 3rd edition? They'd say, hell no. It's not even the same gameplay. There's no relation at all. It's only after you point out to them that in the splat books, there are some ideas that you see in the WotC edition where they go, oh, I didn't even know that. And why would they when 99.9% of DMs refuse to use the rules that you're going to eventually see in WotC? Like the idea of feats were already introduced through the splat books. We didn't use them. I never met a DM that used feats in 2nd edition. I'm not saying there's not a guy out there, but sorry, if you're one guy out of 100,000, you really don't represent 2nd edition or that part of the hobby. You represent yourself, but you have nobody behind you. It's not like a crowd of people that are on your side going, yeah, we did it too. It's not the case. See, there's the actual experience that we had with 2nd edition, and then there is what people assume that come into the picture later on that weren't there, and they look at the splat books and go, they assume so much from the splat books, what it meant. Like, oh, 2nd edition DMs must have been doing this. I'm like, well, you're guessing. You weren't there. And no, we weren't. In my opinion, when you met 2nd edition DMs back during the actual old school time, what you'd find is a very authentic D&D experience. And 2nd edition produced a lot of good game masters. Like, if you go back to AD&D 1st edition, less than 10% of their DMs were really good. Like, it didn't produce a ton. Same thing with original D&D. Same thing with 3rd edition. Ironically, different game, but it didn't produce many great DMs. Actually, 3rd edition did worse, so did 4th and 5th, than even original D&D and AD&D 1st edition. When you get to 2nd edition, something unique happens that has not happened in any edition before it or any edition after it. 80 to 90% of the DMs were absolutely good. Like, that's what second edition produces. And I can say that confidently, and I know it's backed up. And I don't have a bunch of people out there arguing this point. And I've said it multiple times, and there's lots of people out there that want to argue every detail that I say out there. No one has made an argument against this because I know it's factually true, and anybody who is in the world of second edition will fucking agree with me. Period. Hands down, because it is a fact, not an opinion. But it's not just good game masters. When you look at AD&D, first edition and original D&D, 30% of their players in each realm were good. When you get the third edition up, you're more talking like 10% of their players were good. You get the second edition, and you had a player play second edition for even a year. And what you'd find out is right away that player was better. And we would produce 80 to 90% of our players were really good. Like, really good. There's another mindset unique to second edition. It's not that I don't see individuals doing unique things with other editions. I just never seen it be so open as it was in second edition to make changes. Like in original D&D and AD&D 1, you'd produce rule lawyers. Like people that were sticklers to the rules. The DMs would be stickler to the rules. When you get to second edition, the concept of being stickler to the rules, it was gone. And rule lawyers understood this. They came in and just stopped being rule lawyers because it was frowned upon to be a rule lawyer in a second edition game because the DMs don't care about the book in that way. It's a toolkit, not a game in itself. And all the players are accepting of these changes, unlike players from original D&D and AD&D first edition. There was an expectation that things weren't going to be as they were in the book. And that expectation does not exist with original D&D or AD&D first edition or third edition, fourth edition, or fifth edition. It only exists in second edition, and the mindset of our players was completely accepting of adjustments. And that you didn't even have to say, hey man, I don't run it by the book. Second edition players knew instinctively you didn't run it by the book because second edition is not a game in itself. It's a toolkit of rules that teaches you first how to play the game well, how to run the game well, and it gives you what you need to go forward. You go back to AD&D first edition and you look at the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I admit that first edition AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide is amazing. It's amazing. Has some of the greatest writing in there as far as, informing you about what to do, how to run games, the whole 9 yards. But the problem is, even though it would tell you what to do, it didn't seem to inspire the DMs. It didn't get them to do it. Like, it's like, I'll tell you what to do, let's see what we produce. And then it's like less than 10% of their DMs really end up, producing something good. So even though the book told you what to do, it didn't trigger you to get on the path of being good. Second edition, as messy as some of the writing can be, the difference between second edition and first edition was it figured out how to get you where you needed to be good. Like, that was the secret, right? It might seem messy, but there's like a secret sauce in there. And clearly, that secret sauce did not exist in the original D&D, first edition AD&D, or third, fourth, or fifth. And I believe there will never be another edition of D&D that ever produces like 80 to 90% of its players and game masters as being good. I found the original D&D and AD&D first edition produces slightly more on the good side than, say, third, fourth, and fifth, but not much more. And nowhere near the levels of what second edition produces. It's like, I'll look at first edition AD&D guys, and they'll be like, well, this is the reason my game is better. My game is better. I'm like, yeah, but we had the better game masters and the better players, and if you were there during the old school, you know this, and you can't deny it, so shut the fuck up. It's like you might have loved first edition AD&D, but the chances of you finding a great DM to run the game for you was very low. So where would you go? A lot of first edition guys, players, right away when second edition came out, they noticed. They noticed quality, they noticed the whole 9 yards, and they start flocking to second edition. We stole almost every first edition player out there. Right? I mean, look, it's that we're still in the hobby. Understand that when second edition comes out, the company's losing money, and we're losing players en masse to other games at the time. We drag some back, But AD&D First Edition ran most of our players, D&D players, away from D&D. That's why they were already losing money. Because First Edition DMs were they created the negative stereotypes you hear today. So all the negative things you hear about old school DMs and everything else, don't look at Second Edition. It has nothing to do with us. We don't even have a relation to these accusations. This is all true about First Edition AD&D DMs. I mean, I don't know how many First Edition AD&D DMs I've seen tell players, well, too bad, I'm not going to do what you would like, and you have no other choice. Either play my game or have no game. Now, imagine hearing that tons of times, and imagine how that makes a lot of players in the hobby feel, especially around D&D. You have all these DMs telling you en masse that, fuck you, I won't do anything you want, and you have no other choice. Like, you have no other choice. You either play this or you play nothing. But imagine the big issue is it's the majority of players wanting to change, and all the DMs pretty much are telling them to fuck off. Right? So when Second Edition came out, of course, they want to run to that. The issue is we still have all the fucking negativity we were dragging with us from AD&D First Edition. The stereotypes, everything. I mean, Second Edition guys would do good, but we'd have players walking away going, no, you're probably like those other guys. And we're like, we're not. But they're leaving that part of the hobby anyway and playing other games. World of Darkness, Pendragon, Palladium, the whole 9 yards, running away. Long before WotC ever has third edition. Now, understand when third edition came out with WotC, what did the majority of D&D players do? They all went there and they looked back at the AD&D First Edition DMs. Not us Second Edition guys, because we never did this shit to them. They looked back at the AD&D First Edition guys and went, you know how you told us we have no other choice? And we have to play the game the way you want? Yeah. Well, fuck you. Now we got third edition, so fuck you, AD&D First Edition DMs. Fuck you. And could you blame them? Could you blame them for being the way they were when third edition came out? They talk about edition wars. There was no reason to have an edition war other than the third edition crowd hated the old school because the third edition crowd were the players that were told they had no other choice, that were told to fuck off. That's where all the players were in third edition. When you looked at third edition, it was all the guys who were told, you have to do it our way, you have no other choice, and at the same time, these are the guys that represent the majority. Third edition is the majority of D&D people when it comes out. And it wasn't just that first edition AD&D DMs ran them there, which they did, but at the same time, TSR served the DMs, served a minority of people in the hobby and ignored the majority. And they start losing massive amounts of money halfway through what they're doing because they're ignoring the majority and serving a minority. And what the minority wanted wasn't what the vast majority wanted. They wanted to ease up on the grind. They didn't want the overkill with third edition. They wanted things to be eased up just a bit. And in second edition, we were trying our best to give them that. And honestly, by allowing us DMs to do whatever we want, where TSR was like, we don't know what to do. We're going to give you something and just, can you guys manage the customers so we don't lose them? So second edition was sort of put in there as a way to try to keep the customers with us, right? To keep the customers there. And I think we did a great job in the second edition world at keeping customers for a long time around TSR, not having them all just run away. The problem is the reputation created by AD&D First Edition DMs was so bad that at the end of the day, it still made most people walk away, no matter how good of a job we did. We could have done the greatest job ever for what the majority wanted. They were done. They were already bitter with us. They hated us. And when they looked at us the same way they looked at the first edition AD&D DMs. Because, you're part of their team. That's the way they looked at us. It was awful. So when third edition came out, it made all the sense in the world why 90% of D&D players were in the third edition world the second WotC brought that game out. And they were standing over there looking back at AD&D First Edition DMs going, hey, now we have a choice, so fuck you. To this day, the OSR is like TSR. it serves a minority. And though you can make a good amount of money as a game designer for the OSR, if you're only serving the minority, no matter how good that money looks, you're leaving 90% of the money you could make on the table. I thought the OSR was going to be a way of introducing the old school in a way that would be more pleasing to the majority. I didn't think the OSR was going to be mostly introducing the majority to the game and the gameplay that they've always hated. Like, it has, even with host rules, the gameplay for most OSR games is the same gameplay that the majority of D&D players back in the 80s said, we absolutely reject this. Like, we just want to make it clear to you, to AD&D first edition DMs and the original D&D DMs, we, the majority, the vast majority, not like just 51%, more like close to 90%, reject the way your game is and the way you run it. We reject it, right? And now the OSR is like, we'll give you that again. We won't really change the gameplay. We'll add some, kinks in and some quirks. But for the most part, we're going to give you the gameplay that 90% of you told us you reject. And that is why there's so many people on the outside. And look at like Shadowdark. The second you try to get away from that gameplay, suddenly you get a bunch of people that supposedly don't exist, or old school guys will make excuses like, oh, they're 5e guys, like we are getting the majority. No, you're not. 90% of the people that are interested in the OSR do not buy OSR games. I mean, come on. 90% of the money is left on the fucking table because you are serving a minority OSR game designers, because maybe you didn't do your homework. What you're producing is what 90% of our players in the D&D world back in the 80s rejected. Straight out rejected. Now, I don't care if you like AD&D first edition. I mean, facts are facts, right? AD&D first edition failed. Original D&D failed. Second edition AD&D succeeded, but only took a hit because of the failure of AD&D first edition and original D&D. So second edition, if it would have been the first game, the majority would have been happier. We wouldn't have had them turn away. But what they didn't like was original D&D and first edition AD&D. And second edition, we had to carry that negativity on our back. And even though we were doing what the majority was asking, we had to pay a price because the majority was still assuming we were the worst because they were relating us to the scumbag AD&D first edition DM crowd. It's nice to see young people picking up second edition AD&D in 2024 and trying it out, game mastering and playing. And I promise those people, they're not wasting their time. You'll become a better game master running it. You'll become a better player playing it. And you can take that with you to any game you go to. The best WotC DMs I've ever met, like 3rd edition, 4th edition, and 5th edition, the best DMs I ever met in the WotC world were all former TSR people. And the majority of them were former 2nd edition AD&D DMs. And so, of course, they carry that with them. I never seen a WotC DM produced only by WotC that I think is great, but I have seen good WotC DMs that were originally TSR, like 2nd edition especially. And please do me a favor, because if you know 2nd edition, how it really was ran and how it really was, introduced and the way people experienced it back in the old school, you would not compare that to 5e. Like, stop. Like, there is no real comparison. The experience is in a different world. It's not even the same game. There is no relation in that way. So I don't care if you find features in the Splat books that you might find, like, say, in 3rd edition with feats and stuff. Not the same experience. Go back to the actual old school and you realize those books have no influence on the experience at the table. So understand, I'm talking about 2nd edition at the table, not the 2nd edition you assumed was at the table. The great thing about 2nd edition is it's not like old school in the way old school would be. I mean, in this way, it can keep up. Like, 2nd edition can be fresh and new in 2024. Why? Because DMs can do whatever they want. So we can give out new content. We can make massive changes to the game to adjust to something different, new, evolve. And that's the great thing about 2nd edition. It's not stuck in like a time thing, like again, a time capsule, right? Second edition can be as fresh in 2024 as it was in the 80s, as it was in the 90s, because DMs can do whatever they want with the game, so you can modernize the game, or you can run something that feels like it's from back in the old school. You can do all that with second edition. You can hit all, right? And to me, in my opinion, because of that, second edition is still going to produce a better game than third edition, fourth edition, and fifth edition, even in 2024. So this video is a gift to my fellow second edition people. You know, it's your Christmas gift, right? It's Christmas Eve. Here you go. Merry Christmas. Anyway, for now, everyone, even the worst people in the world that hate me, it's Christmas Eve. Everyone, for now, take care.